Hi, everyone. My name is Colin Goldberg, and today is Thursday, August 7th, 2025. And we're here for Techspressionist Salon number 97. The topic is creative coding. We have four artists here today to talk a little bit about their practices and how they use code to create their work. Um, we have also in the chat a PDF for instructions of how to use Zoom translated captions that was prepared by Cynthia Beth Rubin. And if you're interested in having uh, the audio translated into a different language in real time, you can download that PDF and follow the instructions. So basically, I'm not going to give a whole long-winded explanation about creative coding because it's not really my area of expertise, although I have, dabbled a little bit. I did my first animation work in BASIC back in the 80s on my Commodore. And lately I've sort of picked it up a little bit, asking ChatGPT to write code for me and describing some different things just as a fun
Interesting.
experiment, a little bit of cheating. Um, I do ask that anybody who's not presenting currently to mute yourselves so we can make sure the audio is nice and clean. So the featured artists for today's salon are Anton Dubrovin, who is from Kazakhstan, zooming in from Moscow, Russia right now. We have Alan Hirsh, who's from Chevy Chase, Maryland. They're in the States. Um, Elio Ramos-Colón, who's from Gurabo, Puerto Rico, and Chris Bly from Portland, Oregon. So without further ado, that's the lineup in that order. Each artist is going to have about 15 minutes or so to present, share your work through screen share, and I will start a timer for each artist, and then around 2 minutes before it ends, I'll just give you a heads up. So Anton, you want to take it away?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So nice to see you. Yeah, and I'm excited to start. So, yeah, we'll have to share a screen now. And okay. So I would like to start with a little introduction. Uh, how I started with art and my journey. So I was always fascinated with abstract art and especially movements like color field and abstract expressionism. And you see the artworks of the artists that I was really moved and inspired with. So it's really like moved me deeply, especially the focus on theory of color, transcendence, spirituality, and how they impact, how the works impact the viewer emotionally and physically. So this is where I felt that I want to start creating my works. And so the first thing I was thinking and wondering, is it possible to recreate the effect of color field uh, using a modern digital media? And thinking of it, I started to experiment with graphic art and then with AI. So this is one of the first works that I made with machine learning using my own data sets. And I will show you a couple of this kind of works. Yeah, I was trying to recreate color field with AI and I felt like it was working. I also created some video loops and I really liked it. I had a great response also, but still I was kind of frustrated with the limitation that AI and video formats have. And so I still had this question, what does it mean for digital art to be displayed? And I mean, especially compared to physical works, particularly coal field paintings, which is traditionally experienced at a large scale, often in public places. This painting are immersive, and one of the reasons is because of their size and presence. And I believe that scale and environment are essentially for this kind of work to create the intended experience. But then I started to think that digital art also can be in large formats, like in the big walls, huge screens. They can be in motion. This work is my work exhibited on a big wall in a museum in Goa, which is big scale. But what is truly beautiful about digital art, I think, is that you can also view the actual work and not a reproduction in your own private space. And this kind of intimate private experience is something that traditional art doesn't always, or physical art doesn't always allow. And I think it's incredibly important. This is also my work, that image made by my friend in his studio, and it's my work displayed on his different monitors and devices. So I wanted to explore that. I wanted to create works that were flexible, that could adapt to any screens, any format and context. I wanted them to break out of UI limitations of platforms and apps. And that what led me to start learning how to create art with code. And now I'm going to start showing you my works that I made with code. Yes, so this one of the first that I created, is one of the first of my generative art collections. And what was amazing for me, that all the restrictions of video, like duration, resolutions, compressions, disappear when you create with code. You can build endless animations, works that evolve forever and loop perfectly without interruption. You can make them any size or format, and they will display flawlessly on any screen, phone, or iPad, or monitor. And that flexibility is something you simply can get from video file or any physical work. So also what is exciting for me is the variety that you can introduce. The same idea, the same artwork can be expressed in many different ways, different colors, different variation, but all connected to the same core. And yeah, and this what was really inspiring to me, and still really inspiring. And I started with JavaScript and just the CSS. It was really simple works, but it wasn't enough for what I was wanting to achieve. And then I found GLSL, a language that is used for game development, and that it works with shaders and color animation. And now I'm going to show you my works that I made with GLSL. This one is one of my favorites, and one of the first. So I fell in love with GLSL, and because it was feeling like I'm putting my hands into a jar of colors, mixing them like fluid sculpture, shaping, and them with math and light. And also, I'm not really interested in complex forms. I just like to work with color and time to shape form through movement using just simple functions. And what I aim is to create an experience like a transition from one emotional state to another. And this is why I use slow, soft movements and rich colors, and nothing should be fast or overwhelming. The artwork should feel present, but not demanding attention. And one of people who collected my works said that he likes to put my work on a second screen while working and switch his attention to it from time to time just to reset and to spend a little time with it. So I found it really interesting and really inspiring because I feel like my artwork should be something that you can live with, let it like play, and while you have a conversation, but come back to it when you need it and spend time with it for like for I don't know, a couple of minutes, or and also watch how it will evolve. So, and I feel like it should set a mood, vibe, and in a space, something quiet and like meaningful, and especially if it's in a private space, the space where we live in. And so this is like what is my idea of working, not just creating digital art, but shaping like a visual experience that become a part of environment. That's all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Anton. Do you want to stop your share?
Yes.
Great. Awesome. Really enjoyed that. So I'm sure there's going to be some questions. What I'm going to do, and this is what we've done in the past with other salons, is just ask everyone to hold your questions until the end. And then, we can go through with a show of hands. I'm also going to paste Anton's Instagram into the chat. If anyone's interested in seeing more of his work, definitely give him a follow. So, yeah, awesome. So the next artist who is up is Alan Hirsh, who's from Chevy Chase, Maryland, USA. And, I had asked each artist to give a little bit of an intro about themselves and their work. But you know what? I think I'm going to just skip that and let the artists introduce themselves and say what they want, because yeah, it's just better that way. So Alan, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. So can everybody see the first slide?
Yep.
Okay, so this gives you an overview of my system. I am a biophysicist, and through my artist brother 30 years ago, I began to do serious computer programming too. I taught myself an advanced form of BASIC. And many years later, I decided to create my own kind of generative art with code, doing it my own way. So these bullet points give you a pretty good idea of what I do. It is a generative system. It uses 3 images simultaneously, going from pixel to pixel in register. In other words, there are pointers on each pixel, and the images are the same size. So I'm moving from pixel to pixel in register. It's using 11 dimensions to put into, I have thousands of equations I've written. And when I'm painting, I'm using linked equation sets. And the inputs, the numerical inputs to the equations are the 9 RGB color values in the 3 concurrent pixels. And then I calculate the X and Y position. I use a very large mix of mathematics. I use all the elementary functions. I use numerical calculus, mostly numerical integration. Recursion, of course, like in fractals, and logical branching based on both color and position functions, which are integrated into the rest of the system. What it does in terms of this, it has a space and a color component. In the space component, it takes it calculates a new position, and then it goes in the source image and takes the pixel in that new position and puts it into the target position, which is in register. So if it's at position X, Y in both images, it takes the pixel from another place in the source image and puts it into that position in the target image. When I color things using a different part of the program, each pixel is in a source image is addressed, and then I take the color values from the 9 or 16 or 25 pixels around each image, and those color values are fed into particular equation sets that I've written. People call them filters, I guess, in the modern world. And the outputs are used to change the RGB values of the pixel in the center. So I'm microscopically moving every pixel in the image, in the source image, or coloring every single pixel. Everything's done microscopically, pixel by pixel. The space transformations typically take 15 to 30 seconds in a 15 meg file, and the color transformations run from 13 to 15 seconds to color every pixel. So as you might imagine, I have an embarrassingly large amount of art. I also invented and patented a new way to up-res images so that I can take a 15 meg image, which has a native size of about 6 inches by 8 inches at 300 dpi, and take it up to 100 inches by 100 inches at 300 dpi. And it's pretty much in beautiful shape. I have very large paintings hanging around framed paintings hanging around my apartment, which is sort of my art studio, art gallery. And at my son, who's a mathematician's urging over the last few years, I finally wrote a loop program, by which I can make videos by iterating control coefficients in subsets of the equations, and then just creating a whole line of frames, which I can then concatenate using commercial software into videos. You'll see a couple of them at the end. So this is the graphical user interface. I don't have time to go through what every one of these is. Some of them are coefficient and exponent inputs. Some of them are recursion numbers, and some of them are just labels for equation sets. But as you can see, I can do a lot of different things. When I actually paint, because it's generative, I'm pushing a button. This is what I see. I just see a lot of numbers. I don't see what I'm doing. It's hidden from me. But of course, these numbers are telling me things like the contributions of the different components of the equations, right? And then this tells me, for instance, where I'm moving the pixels, where I'm taking the pixels from, you know, and moving them into these positions here. So everything you're going to see from now on, both still images and at the end some videos, were made from this one single photograph. It was taken by my daughter when she was on a trip in the Netherlands. And a teenager, she's a good photographer. I am not a good photographer. I'm a lousy photographer. It's just what I do with photographs. It's interesting. But she's a good photographer. She took this photo of this beautiful antique windmill, of course, that the Netherlands are famous for. And so everything you're going to see from now on is a manipulation of this windmill. So because a windmill can be thought of as a sort of a symbol of solar power, which it certainly is. The wind is driven by the sun. Some of my images are pro-solar power. You can probably imagine that I'm not a big fan of the present president of the United States and his pathological hatred of windmills. So this is sort of, I interpret it as like, you know, petroleum pollution interacting with solar power. And then this is like big oil smashing into solar power. And there's just an interesting modest distortion physically, and an interesting colorization. You can see, I don't know if I probably can't blow things up. I'm not sure I can do that here. But the nice thing about coloring individual pixels is that you can produce a patina, a richness that you could get from carefully hand-painted material. In fact, if you blew this up, one of the things I can do is, of course, I'm coloring at a microscopic level, which even a hand artist can't do, which is, it gives you rather interesting results. Now, this is very interesting. You see all these diamond structures here. If we go back to the original photo, if you look down right in the slightly left center, right at the bottom of this roof, which is a storage shed, you'll see the top of a window into the interior of the shed. And it's very hard to see it here, but that's a diamond-shaped window. Because the moving the pixels can not only change their placement in the image, but expand or contract them. You can these are all that window blown up and moved around. Okay. Sometimes I tend more towards a photographic structure. This is more of a painterly structure, right? So this sort of converts the windmill into something that looks quasi high tech, right? Which I think is kind of interesting. And then it was colored as if it was then painted, but the structure is not. It retains a photographic quality in the sense that it's not blurred the way a paintbrush would blur things. This is another surreal photographic type approach, because I haven't colored it. Each pixel has retained its color. The structure is surreal, but there's still a photographic quality. So it's something I didn't anticipate when I first started doing this. There's another one which is also photographic in that sense. And this is another one. Okay. But this is more fluid. It's not as quite as geometric, but still retaining that photographic sense. But then I can highly color them, right, to get more of a painterly quality, which is something that was very important in terms of what I wanted to do. I wanted to use mathematics, not the way a fractal system does, which paints mathematics itself, but to use mathematics as brush and paint and canvas in that sense. Here's another even more surreal version. And as you can see, it's the number. I once calculated technically how many, using a 5 million pixel system, which is I'm using 5 million pixel inputs as images. How many technically how many images you could make in an 8-bit RGB system. And the answer is about a Google to the 360,000th power. So even though I'm an optimist, I don't think I can explore that space very effectively. Here's a more whimsical transition. And then here's the same thing colored, right? Which I think is a really interesting transition. And here now is a rearrangement so complete that if I showed that to a naive observer, they would never guess that it came from a windmill. I mean, it just looks like some sort of, I don't know, modern structure. Here also is a highly modified system, but again, more fluid than the others. More painterly in a sense, but then retaining, of course, the original colorization. And then here's another one. And then here's one that's highly colored. And this to me makes it look, it's kind of ironic to me because this sort of looks like something that might be an electrical generating structure, which, considering that the windmill is, of course, in the modern world, an electrical generating structure is kind of a nice confluence philosophically. And if we go back,
Alan, you have just over 2 minutes left. I just wanted to let you know in case you wanted to show.
Okay. So let me go past all of these, and I'm going to show you one more. This is really highly structured in color, but then I want to show you some some videos. So here's a video made from, again, that original photograph. And here is another video made from the same photograph. These generally, I'm making them at 600 to 700 frames to make this. Takes quite a few hours in the computer to generate them. And I guess that's, I guess just, I should say, I hope my presentation helps you appreciate the power of mathematics as a fine art tool. And I want to thank the Techspressionist leadership for the opportunity. And you can find me as the Abstract Gardener on the web.
All right. Thanks so much, Alan. And I'm going to paste your Instagram into the chat as well.
Sure.
So anyone who would like to see more of your work can follow you. Awesome. So thanks so much for presenting. I think it's really interesting how, in your work, it seems like it's as much a process of discovery as it is of intent, that is, kind of playing with the code and seeing what it results in. So yeah, that's kind of been my experience when playing around with code as well. All right, so the next artist up is Elio Ramos-Colón from Gurabo, Puerto Rico. Elio's work is actually one of the first bodies of work that I found on Instagram when I was looking for other artists to be involved in the group. I remember, I think he might have been the first code-based artist actually that I noticed the work online and tagged it with the hashtag, and he got involved with some of the early exhibitions and other things like that. So Elio's been part of the community for quite a while now. And I would like to introduce you and welcome you to share your work.
Thank you. Okay. So I prepared this presentation about creative coding, and of course my name is Elio Ramos-Colón, and my handle is GarabatosPR in Instagram and Twitter also. I'm gonna begin talking a little bit about my inspirations for some of my work. Of course, the inspiration from many of us are the classics. Hilma, I think I lost. I don't know. Well, I don't know what happened. I don't know what's going on.
I see your screen just fine. Can you clean up the slide?
You can see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm trying to, but I can see my screen. Okay, now. Okay, sorry. So some of my inspirations are the classic artists like Hilma, Kandinsky, Malevich, and also the contemporary artists and creative coder Manuel Gamboa, which is actually the first work that I saw in creative coding was by this guy, and I was shocked, and I decided to work to do some work in that area. Of course, my background is in coding. I teach computer science, but after I saw the work from Manuel, I began to do work projects in creative coding. Some of the ideas or concepts that inspire my work are based in my background in physics, particles, fields, noise, randomness, and also the aesthetics that is pretty common in math, like geometry, symmetry, patterns, and of course, asymmetry, recursion, and other things. And also, I am very influenced by the open source culture. So you're gonna see that I would say that 100% of my work is open source. So you can see the code, and you can work with the code, and you can do forks and all kinds of things. So some of the tools that I use are basically, I began doing creative coding with processing, but maybe did few projects with processing at the very beginning, like probably 7 or 8 years ago. But then I began to work with P5.js, which is the processing version that works online. So all the projects I'm going to show you today are done with P5.js, which is a JavaScript version of processing. I like it because you can share your work in online, and you can also add some interactivity to your work. And it's my favorite language to do generative art and creative coding. All the works that I'm going to show you today are done in a platform called Open Processing. It's a paid platform, but you can work for free. And I'm going to share some of my sketches from this platform in Open Processing. Well, now, typical basic code in P5.js, that, as you can see, is very intuitive in terms of, from the perspective of an artist. You can create a canvas, you can define the background of the color of the background, and then you have another function to draw things in your canvas. So in this case, it's just a simple circle, okay? So the projects I'm going to show you today are based on particles. Particles means it's an abstraction. Basically, it's a bunch of particles I throw on a virtual canvas. And these particles, you can define how they move based on two mathematical formulas. One is related, in this case, U is related with the horizontal movement, and the other one is related to the vertical movement. So you can define all kind of, you can do all kind of math and define all kind of formulas for this. A typical formula that I use for most of the work that I'm going to show you today is based on this trigonometric function. I'm not gonna go too much into the details, but basically is this guy here takes care of the horizontal movement of the particles, and the B takes care of the vertical movement. And depending on where you are located in the canvas, you're gonna move in a different way. So basically, that's the main idea. For instance, if I take these particles and throw it in the surface of a canvas, you're gonna see something like this. It's a black and white representation. Not too interesting. Well, it's interesting, but you can see loops, you can see shapes that are close, and so that's the basic movement of the particles based on these formulas. So I began, well, basically my approach to art is to take basic ideas and try to see how far I can take a very simple concept or a very simple formula, how far I can take it to produce something interesting. So after this, my next experiment was to put color to the particles. And in this case, also the particles, you can have particles that are, you can change the particle and as a generic shape, like a circle or even a line or a rectangle and stuff like that. So this is one of the first things that I did is, I think I did this in 2021. I put the QR code. If you want to point your cell phone, you can, it's gonna take you to the actual animation. Of course, this is the final product of the animation, but probably it's much more interesting to see the whole thing moving around. Let's see if I can show you here. Let's see if I can find. Okay, no, here no. Let's see. Let me new share. Okay, let me see if I can see my browser here. Okay. Okay. So probably if you pointed your, okay, here we go. Probably you're seeing the movement of the particles. Of course, you are in the transparency. I'm showing a snapshot of the actual animation. Has this repetitive movement, intense colors. There is some mechanical movement, but also something that looks maybe like organic. I don't know, probably something like that. So basically, that's an extension of the basic particle model that I showed you before. Then I began exploring this idea of particles moving in this virtual canvas. And basically I took, I began doing stuff like connecting particles, adding transparency, all that kind of stuff. And so I'm gonna show you another version, which is around here. This is, okay, if you look, this is basically the same thing, but connecting particles and adding probably some lines connecting the particles, and you can see it's something more looks more like an actual painting type of thing. Actually, I can show you okay, here is. So if you, I'm gonna share my presentation, you can see probably the animation is also more interesting than this. Another version using a different palette of color, based on the same idea. And probably I'm gonna show you some other. Let me go back to the presentation. Okay, here we go. So here is the original thing. This is the next version is called Kaleidoscopio 2001. Let's see, let me move this here. Okay, this is the other version. And this one is working on the same principle of the particles, but changing direction. This one is called traffic, and is basically two lines. All the particles emerge from these two lines, and the final pattern is looks like different type of layers of particles moving in opposite directions. This one is the one of the ideas that emerged from that particle system, and actually this one was part of the exhibition in 2023. It's right here, and basically, if you see, as you can see, is also an animation. Sometimes the final product is the interesting thing, but sometimes it's good to see the process and see how the final product you end up with the final product in this case. I made a selection of all these pieces in open processing. Of course, all these pieces you can look behind the scenes, look at the code. You can fork the code. You can make copies of your code and probably modify, learn from the code, change the color, change the palettes, and do all kinds of cool things. So in my case, I prepare a small curation. I curated, basically put together a few other examples of my work. Some of them are here. So if you go to this link, you're gonna find if you go to this QR code, you're gonna see all these pieces. And some of the ideas are, as I said, I would say that 50% of the pieces here are based on this idea of particles moving in different directions. But I also I do some project with recursion, but I prefer to use random recursion because the patterns tend to be more interesting and not that mechanical in certain sense. I'm not sure if I have additional time, Colin, or.
Yeah, you have just about 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay, so probably I'm gonna show you this guy here, which is probably a different. Okay, so this one is also based on particles, but I'm gonna show you the animation from the very beginning. Of course, at this stage, basically we have, in this case, I'm using very simple formula. Basically, are circles moving around. The circles are expanding and contracting, and with some periodicity, the color change. And basically what you can see here is layers of particles. I like it because it has a very interesting transparency effect. So this one is also based on the same technique. So again, if you write Garabatos PR in open processing, you're gonna find all my sketches. I have 500 sketches. Some of them are experiment, some of them are more polished, like this one. So I'm open to, so you can go and take a look. And finally, I'm gonna go back to the presentation here. And basically now here is my contact information. My email, mycoby@gmail. My handle, Garabato Spear, and of course, my open processing account. So that's it. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Thanks so much, Elio. I'm going to paste Elio's Instagram into the chat as well here. Very cool. And I also really liked how you used QR codes in the presentation. A couple of people commented on that. I think that's a really good idea, especially because these salons are being recorded. So when people are watching on YouTube, they can still scan the QR codes. You know, they're not going to be able to see the contents of the chat, but they are going to be able to see anything that's being shared on the screen. So I think that's a really interesting way to use the codes. So we have one artist left, that is Chris Bly from Portland, Oregon. I believe Chris's handle on Instagram is machine.arm. And I found Chris's work when I started to play around with a plotter. I got myself an AxiDraw a couple of years ago and was playing with plotting some vector art that I drew in Illustrator. And then I found Chris's work, which is generative work. And I thought it was really interesting how he used the plotter in terms of a way to execute his code-based work. So without further ado, I will introduce Chris.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chris. Like Colin said, I've been doing generative art for the last few years now. I got into it initially. I went to school for math and computer science, so I have a history of coding, but I didn't get into the art aspect of it until a few years ago during COVID, when I bought one of the AxiDraw pen plotters. I don't know, I came across somebody's account online, and I was like, that looks like a fun little hobby. So I got into it that way, and then sort of discovered B5JS after that, and then started playing around with that to create a lot of my work. Because of the restrictions inherent with pen plotters, let me share my screen here. A lot of my work is linear based. As you could see, some of it's difficult sometimes to do stuff that's outside of that realm, but I find that the restrictions of that are kind of interesting. You know, having a little bit of a box to work outside of or inside of is often for me inspires more creativity than being, you know, left completely up to my free will. But this is my Instagram page. I do have a lot of videos up here that can show the process firsthand. And you can see the machine in action. I don't have a camera hooked up to the machine in here, so sometimes it's better for me to, you know, exhibit it firsthand through the videos that I've taken. And similar to a lot of artists, my work is heavily based in themes, you know, such as randomness and recursion, patterns that aren't really evident all the time. I find creative coding in particular to be really interesting because, you know, it's one of those things where, sorry here, just like any sort of coding, the mistakes I make sometimes can lead to, you know, fun little unexpected results and can take me off in a completely different tangent. I like the idea of essentially collaborating with the computer. I see it as a a partner for my work, where it's like I come up with, you know, 70-80% of the program, and there's a certain amount of randomization and noise that goes into it that I leave up to the computer. And so like it always creates for some unexpected results, which I find really interesting. This is just some examples of some stuff I've used. In addition to pens, I've used acrylic paints. I've used charcoal, which is kind of a difficult one. You have to go back and find that. Anybody who's used a pen plotter can automatically understand the difference between, you know, something like that and just a normal like inkjet printer and the possibilities that are there. And I'm looking to explore some more of those in the future. But right now I'm currently a little bit limited with space. And as you can see, let me see if I can open it up here. Lately, I've been using P5 and exploring some of the MIDI functionality, where I'll use a MIDI controller to, I'll just show you here. So this is an example of a simple sketch I did recently, and I don't know if you guys can see it, but here I have just a little MIDI controller that I can use to adjust some of the parameters on the fly, as opposed to having to like completely go in and rerun the program. And this has actually been a lot of fun. This is just a really simple example right now I did for this demonstration. And if you scroll down to the bottom here, it has all of the different variables that I can, you know, log in real time if I want to take notes or whatever. But I've been playing around a lot with that recently. I feel like it's a way for me to adjust all of the variables on the fly. That way I can, you know, don't have to go in and type it into the original P5 code and then rerun it again and everything. So that's been a lot of fun to mess around with too. Let me see here. Most of my work is, as you can see, is fairly abstract. I started as an artist in middle school, drawing, painting, and then one point went to architecture school, and then later on studied computer science and programming and math. So this has actually been a fun little marriage between, you know, all of my different interests over the years, and an interesting way for me to express myself that I didn't actually foresee years ago. But yeah. And I'm gonna see if I can share, let's see here. So this is an example of, this is that simple MIDI controller one that I recently did. As it's all written in P5.js, and it just has where is it? Everything's basically assigned to one of those channels right here. And it's actually really fun because, like, normally, for instance, I would have to, you know, go through, and if I wanted to change something, I'd go in here, do it, run the program, see what changes. This is This is a recent one I did that I was really happy with. Let me see if we can zoom it out for you. One of the interesting things about working with the pen plotter is the results that I see on screen aren't always what ends up on the paper. Various restrictions through color, the pens I use, the paper. A lot of times I get, failed mistakes because there'll be too much density or something, and the pen will literally wear through the paper in the process, and I'll come back and it'll be torn up. But I don't know, it's something that I find extremely fun, and it's never gets old watching the plotter work for me. But there are a lot of interesting restrictions that come with it. But let me see here. I'm not sure if I'm. Hang on. Sorry, I forgot I had to change windows here. Yeah. So this is a recent one I did, which actually was deceptively difficult. The subdivisions here were kind of tough, but even getting the hatching, which is a random function starting in various random corners of each tile. And it's one of my most recent works. It's one of the first ones that I've delved into more color. As you can see by looking, if you ever go onto my Instagram, most of my work is very monochromatic and black and white. And I've been trying to subtly, and slowly move away from that while maintaining, a voice that I've already established. And this is one of the first ones that I felt really kind of accomplished that. You can see it. You can see the difference between the plotted version something like this here, and the but yeah. And then yeah, this was this one's kind of a fun one. It's a recent few months back I tried to do a stop motion video, and this is something I actually really want to explore further again too. It actually turned out pretty well for my first one. That one was taken, I think it was 240 frames, if I remember correctly. I ended up using, hooking up my camera to my actual large plotter after the whole thing was plotted, and programming the plotter to go incrementally and take photographs of every single frame. And that's something I actually got inspired to do by another artist, Something Savage on Instagram. He does a lot of time lapse stop motion stuff. And that's something I also want to explore in the future. That whole program was also a generative program. The waves in there created were basically utilized the same sort of thing as some of these recent works that I do. Where they use a lot of Perlin noise to, to create these curves, these undulations. This one is very, landscape oriented, but you can see there it's very good for plotting and anything using a pen. So, but yeah. Let's see here. One more I wanted to show you guys. Another example of this was each January there's a community of us that gets together and does what's called January, where it's all, I'm sure some of you are familiar with it, where it's all generative art-based prompts for the whole month. This was a Annie Albers prompt that I did a little while back. It was one of my first times utilizing acrylic paint. And paint's kind of tricky. One of the things I love about it, but it's also kind of frustrating, is you really have to keep an eye on the paint levels as the machine goes through, and making sure like the brush width and everything is all programmed into your actual JavaScript script. Like, it can be a little bit tedious, and there's a lot of trial and effort that goes into it. That's another thing that I want to explore more in the future. But ideally, I'd like to get to a point. I'm moving into a new studio here soon, so I've been like really busy. But I'd like to get to a point where my work becomes more of a hybrid, because I do have a painting background and a drawing background by hand. I'd like to get to a point where my work becomes more of a hybrid between the machine and myself, maybe even to some sort of situation where I'm working simultaneously on the same paper or canvas as the machine, and have it be like a real-time collaborative effort. But I'm not quite there yet. But I think it could actually produce some interesting results. So, but anyway, that's I guess that's about it for me.
All right. Awesome, Chris. Thanks so much for sharing your work. I remember when I first saw the work involving paint, and I was like, how the heck are you doing that, before I saw the process video. And that just totally blew my mind, how you actually programmed in the motion of the paint, the
Yeah,
brush thing, picking up the paint and going back to the spot it left off. I mean, that's pretty crazy. Very cool. And yeah,
there's literally a dip function in my program for that, and it just draws a little circle, so it goes in and like picks up some of the paint and then goes back. But yeah, that took me a little bit to figure out. But once it worked, I was like, oh, this opens up a lot of possibilities. So.
Absolutely. It reminded me somewhat of Roman Verosco's work, who's recently passed away. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him and his work, but he was
Yeah.
using brush and the plotters, kind of early on. And I think it's really interesting, like where you've taken that. So, we have some time left, about, 15, 20 minutes or so. If anyone has any questions, I was thinking also, it might be interesting. We haven't really done this in the past, to first ask any of the presenting artists if you have any questions for any of the other presenters. And then, we could just generally open it up. But if any of the people here in the audience have questions, just go ahead and use the raise hand tool, which is on the Zoom interface. They keep moving around exactly where it's located, but yeah, it's somewhere. The react button, maybe. Is that it? Yeah. And that little heart on the bottom, the react button, there's a raise hand function. So do any of the artists have any questions for any of the other presenters before we go into the general audience?
Yeah. I have a question for Elio. In your motion equations for the X and Y changes, did you only vary time, or did you actually make the frequency coefficients functions of position or time?
No, well, I probably we can take a look to the code. But let's see if I can share the code, because it's easier to explain. Okay. Well, it's implicit that there is time. Basically, is the whole thing is running in a loop. So basically, the time is implicit, but the movement is based on the previous coordinate. So the particles is in one position, the formula move it to another position, and then repeats again. So that's so it's,
Yeah,
in a sense is implicit.
Yeah, I understand that, but so for instance, when you have a sine kt function, the simplest thing is to have k be a constant, but you get more interesting or complex results if k is a function of u and v and t. I mean, in other words, it itself is a variable. I just want to know whether you did that or whether they were always those are frequency.
Yeah, they are constant. They are constant,
Constant,
basically.
yeah. Okay.
Probably in some other experiments, I tried adding noise to those constants, and probably some of my pieces somewhere, probably in some of the experiments I have done that. But in this case, it's just deterministic motion, basically.
Yeah. Okay. Just wanted to know. Right.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. I just actually pasted Chris's Instagram into the chat for any of you guys who want to give him a follow. Full disclosure, I'm also a collector. I bought a couple prints off of his site, and they're very cool. And that's how I actually, thought, oh, he would be a perfect person to invite to this. So we have a few more questions. Patrick.
Hi. Oh, wait a second. Hang on. Nagin, can you? Okay. So there's gonna be a little bit of an echo. Yeah, no, I've got mine open. So, the one thing that I think is interesting is that you're working with the paintbrushes and that as a function. And the thing is that I was very close to Roman myself. So, and that's one of his Gaia projects up there. So anyways, what happens is that what he used to do is that he used to take the pens and actually rework them and to the point of using
You're muted, Patrick.
instead of using the instead of using a brush. And the thing is that where this kind of influenced me is that I wind up using when I go that approach, I wind up using acrylic or casing in a water brush or something like that. So, how do you think that something, like that sort of approach, have you gone that way, or do you think that, you really like this idea of, using the brush, and how do you keep things consistent, on long runs?
Is that directed towards me?
Yes, to Chris. Yeah, no, I like the fact that you're using brushes and that sort of thing. So I said, I used to know Roman Verosco for a long time. And the thing is, he wound up using, pens with casing in them. And the thing is that I went to water brushes, with watercolor casing, things like that. And have you tried that? And how do you keep the consistency, with your brushes and using, brush-based methods?
I have experimented a little bit with water brushes. It's a little bit difficult. I have to come up with a mechanism to hold it on the plotter without actually squeezing the brush. But as far as regular brushes, the most difficult thing is maintaining the paint level in the tray, because if it gets too low, the strokes can sort of like start to fade out, which can be a cool effect that I've utilized before. So in some of my videos where I've done the painting, you'll see where like I'll even just after like one or two dips, I'll drop a little bit more in the paint tray if I want it consistent. If I want it to run low, I'll do that. Sometimes I'll move the tray around. So there's a lot of different variables just on using a paintbrush alone that you can play around with if you want to have it sort of like fade out and not go back and dip immediately after each stroke, you can do that too. It just depends on the effect that I'm going for. But yeah, I don't have a whole lot of videos of the painting process on my Instagram. It's something I'm slowly still trying to dial in, to be honest with you. And it's also difficult to find works of mine that are compatible with the painting process, and not just exclusively pen. So that's also a challenge too.
Have you looked at the artists who used painting in their in their process? I think there's a couple of artists out in Germany that were doing oil, and then I think Ben Grosser was also winding up having a very a brush based pen plotting system and that sort of thing. I was just wondering about your familiarity with the other artists who've gone into this approach.
Yeah, I've seen a few other artists. I'm blanking on their name right now. I'm sure if I pulled up my Instagram, I'd be able to see them. There is an artist that I follow who does oil-based, and he has an interesting setup to where a couple of his machines are even set up vertically on the wall, and he sets up the tray so that it can go back. And he does a lot of landscapes, sort of stuff that ends up being kind of like slightly pixelated because of the brush strokes and the palette and everything, but it's a really cool effect. And then there's I've seen other artists that use sort of like a sponge type brush, where it goes in and soaks it up, and then they'll let the marks sort of fade out. Yeah, there's a lot of, the possibilities are kind of endless. I mean, I've plotted on wood. I've seen people plot on glass. It's not even just the materials that you can use to plot with. It's also the materials you can plot on, fabric. Like, yeah, so.
Cool. Actually, based on Patrick's question, it reminded me of Joseph Nekvatal's work, who he's a friend, and he's also been involved with the group with Techspressionism for a while now. I'm going to just paste a link into the chat too. So Joseph has been working with basically, like, they're described as computer robotic assisted paintings, but it's like a plotter that's on a very large scale. So the piece I pasted the link in, I believe, is in the collection of the Brooklyn Museum, and it's 64 by 44 inches, computer robotic assisted acrylic painting on velvet. And that was back from 2011. So his work is definitely worth taking a look at too when it comes to the handling of media with those sort of tools. But he refuses to go on Zoom, sadly. So, you know, but you could definitely see his work online.
That's exclusive.
So let's see. We have Cynthia DiDonato up next.
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you to all the presenters today for sharing such fascinating use of coding as a medium. And I have a question for Elio. I went to the open processing Techspressionism subset and looked at all the lovely pieces that are there. And I noticed that it says submit your sketch. So I'm assuming that any of us, because this is open processing, could submit a digital file there, or am I wrong?
Yeah, the thing is that in open processing, you can create a curation and you can tell other people to submit their code, basically. So they can submit, if you are in open processing, if you have an account in open processing, you can add your code to that curation. So basically, it's inside open processing. So
Okay, so the submit your sketch is to submit code, correct?
yes, yeah, yeah.
That's
it's
what I
just-
needed to understand.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Yeah.
Great. And now we have Michael Price.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to give kudos to all the 4 presenters. I think what you've done and what you're doing is really inspirational. This is kind of an open question to anybody who of the 4 who might want to answer, but I was curious about the nature of the math that you're using. I'm got a good math and physics background myself, and so I was just curious whether or not using higher order mathematics, or if you've explored certain areas that are more fruitful using math than others. And for instance, Elio, I saw that you were mentioning not only particles, but fields. And I didn't know whether or not those fields that you might be using are dynamic in a certain way, which might interact the particles together in ways that might not be obvious. So I'm just really kind of curious whether using linear math is more productive than saying using complex functions. But so I'm just really kind of throwing that out there because I was really curious in looking a little more under the hood of what you guys are actually doing.
Yeah, I'm gonna comment on that. Yes, in my case, of course, everyone has their own artistic process. At least for me, in the doing creative coding, in my case, basic, very simple ideas and extended these basic ideas. When I say basic ideas, I mean basic equation, basic formulas, and trying to extend it to different kind of scenarios. For me, that's the way. Well, that's the way that works. That's the way I prefer to work. At a certain stage, when I was beginning to do this type of creative coding things, I used to start with huge, big ideas. I'm gonna use this very complex interaction, this very complex equation, but bottom line is I end up with very basic things, just basic things, basic ideas, and try to see how far I can take them. Yeah, but in some cases I think about probably some kind of higher mathematics in some cases, but for me it's more productive to think in very simple rules and very simple formulas. Yeah.
I guess I'm the opposite of Elio. I try to make my systems as complicated as I can to see if I can still get art out of them. And I guess of all the functional systems that I use, the one that was the biggest leap forward in terms of increased quality and interest was doing numerical integration on the mostly somewhat on positions, but mostly on the color dimensions. I mean, in a certain sense, each one of those is a separate manifold. And so you start integrating them. First of all, you eliminate all kinds of noise that way, because as the integrals get bigger, changes become minor. But then when you start mixing them, and then you do recursion on the numerical integration, you have two numerical integrations and they feed into each other, you really start getting really interesting results. And what, for me, that since the ultimate goal aesthetically was to get as close to manual painting, because after all, if you think about when a manual painter puts a brush into a mixture of paints and then puts the brush on a canvas, the individual flow of dye elements of each thread, thread in the brush is not controlled. And so
Right.
all this kinds of complex patterning that's going on that that Rembrandt can't control. Nobody can control it. So there's all this stuff, but then there's also order to it. And so I'm sort of trying to get at that, but at the same time controlling everything. But yeah, so I really like the complexity. I think the difference between me and Elio is that I'm a biologist, and biologists are in love with complexity.
Yeah.
That's a good answer. Thanks, Alan.
Okay, so we have two more questions. We're kind of getting close to time. We'll take one from Lee Day, and then I saw in the chat Gregory Garvey has a question. So we'll do those two questions before we close. So Lee, you're up.
I was just wondering whether anyone had considered using open frameworks or whether that's just sort of overkill for this kind of work.
Anybody?
I personally don't use open frameworks, but it's just because I like doing everything myself.
Recording in progress.
And but I feel like it's not something that you cannot do. I think it's really cool, and a lot of artists do use and this kind of frameworks. And yeah, but for me, I'm just I really like knowing what I do, what I can do with, and rely only on my own knowledge, and yeah, this is my approach.
I'll put it in more explicit terms. I'm too self-centered to do that. Like Anton, I just want to explore my own mathematics, my own approach, and develop that on my own.
All right.
Yeah.
So we'll take one last question from Greg Garvey.
I have a very brief question for Chris and then a general question for the three artists. For Chris, the question is, how often do you have to, as a brush is used or a pen, does it begin to break down or the bristles spread too much? And how often do you have to replace it? And then the general question is, art movements such as color field painting, conceptual art, or an artist like separately Ellsworth Kelly sought to remove the artist's hand from the work. And how much is that kind of ideological position influence your approach?
With regard to the pens and brushes and stuff, it is an issue having to monitor those tools, especially in a longer plot. There's been times where I've walked out and gone to have a cigarette, come back, and the pen's out of ink, and I got to start all over again, or something like that. But depending on the size and the length of the plot, I do have to monitor those things pretty carefully. Sometimes I think the density of some of the line work can also create a problem. So I've had times where it'll draw so many lines in one space, or so many overlapping lines that'll wear through the paper or whatever surface that I'm on. So it's always like there's a lot of back and forth between once I get like an image that I like and that I want to plot. A lot of times it's like a matter of seeing if it can be plotted. And if not, then what do I have to go do and change in the program to, either get rid of some of the density or get some of the roadblocks that are preventing me from plotting the image that I want to plot. So there's kind of a back and forth sometimes. I've been doing it long enough now to where I can kind of like look at an image and see which ones are going to cause me problems. But yeah. Yeah.
And do we want to, let's just ask any of the other artists if they'd like to speak to Greg's second question.
For me, the complexity of the math means that initially I don't know what it's going to do, and then I try to manipulate it through manipulating the various aspects of the equations. But I think for me, I think philosophically, I'm closest to candid photographers. A candid photographer goes out into the world, and the person doesn't know what they're going to see, and their talent is to be able to capture something that's very interesting. It might be dynamic, it might be static, and all their talent is how they use the camera and how they use post-capture processes in the modern world. And so there's a huge aspect of mystery to it and unanticipated discovery, which is, of course, somewhat similar to the idea of not having, really tight manual control.
Any of the other artists speak to that?
It's a great question, and I've seen a lot of actually artists in Web3 also discussing it, and or about like generative art and cold art. But I personally feel like it's impossible to eliminate the hand of artist from the artwork, even like all the art. This moment we still see the personal style and approach of the artist, and yeah, so even if it's really minimalistic or conceptual work, it still has this kind of aura and like I don't know, this story of the artist. It goes within the artwork. So, but I get that it is in abstraction. There is a like it's a good, maybe it's a great way to approach to the abstraction work, but still. Yeah, thanks.
It's always an experiment. I feel that for instance, all these parameters that I use are, in most cases, I have some idea what's going to happen, but the final word is running the code and begin to think in the aesthetics of what I'm getting. So that's most of the time that is my approach. So in comparison with let's say scientific computing, when you know what you want to get, you're waiting for some results, you're waiting for some solutions. In this case, the final word is the screen, what you see in the canvas, the harmony of the colors, and so it's like you have all this background in computing or probably scientific computing, but you have to sometimes you have to forget some of that stuff when you're doing art. So that's my feeling. That's my approach.
All right, thank you, Elio. And Chris, do you want to close out if you have any thoughts on that as far as the artist's hand goes?
Yeah, I think obviously I agree with what Anton pointed out there, is that, even in a genre such as generative art, there's artists that have a very clear voice. There's artists out there that I could immediately recognize their work without knowing, without a label next to it. So I believe that the artist hand is still very strong, even in this field. One of the personal things I enjoy about it is the collaborative effort between myself and the computer. I can randomize a certain number of variables. It's almost like being in a band with another person where I can decide how much creative control I want. I can make it like 99% is up to me and 1% is the computer. I can make it 50-50 up to the computer. And in those cases, it's really interesting to find out what decisions it makes, what, randomness, what recursion, what noise that I interject into the program, and how that comes out on the other end. And a lot of times, it comes out with something that I didn't particularly foresee, or some sort of variation on my original idea. And then you just wind up going down this rabbit hole. So like, I believe that, as far as the artist's hand, it's still there. And then it's a matter of, sort of curating my work. Sometimes, I'll run a program 100 times before I even just find a composition of that form that I like. And then I'll, send it off to the plotter. And that's, the artist's hand is absolutely in there. It's I think the really great artists that I've come across, and my favorite artists, are the ones that, like I said, you can immediately tell their work without even, seeing their name next to it. So.
All right. Well, that brings us to time. I'd like to, again, thank the 4 artists who presented: Anton, Alan, Elio, and Chris. Great salon. I think that there could be, multiple chapters on this topic. I also was thinking it would be a pretty cool exhibition to organize at some point. If anyone's interested in curating or putting together something that's based on code-based work, I think that'd be kind of cool, because it could be experienced by people all around the world in their browsers versus necessarily having to be done in a physical space. So just a little food for thought there. And we're coming up on next month. The first Thursday of the month is September 4th. So it's looking like that will be our next salon. For those of you watching on YouTube, we meet the first Thursday of every month at noon Eastern time. And I do not believe we have a topic picked out for September, unless I'm just forgetting. So we do have basically an after party, aka the advisory board meeting, or whoever wants to hang out after the recording stops. It's usually a brainstorming session of, like, if anyone has any ideas of what the topic for the next salon would want to be. There's a general rule of thumb that if you suggest the topic, you also will be the moderator. That's just a little caveat there. But other than that, I want to thank you guys for a great salon, and all of the attending artists and members from the public. So without further ado, I'm going to stop the recording in 3, 2, 1, and cut.